it live there. So let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into our 24-hour fundraiser. This is presented to you by Ekansh Foundation in collaboration with CS Studio and media partner Sunmark. Ekansh is a Gen Z-led nonprofit organization that aims to provide vocational education to underprivileged students. So if you are in a position where you can donate, please do visit the link in our bio. And if you're not able to do so, please feel free to volunteer or just spread awareness about the importance of vocational education, because that conversation will go a long, long way. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Anya. We are so privileged to have you with us. So, Anya Kathpalia is a 17-year-old founder of hersuccessbits.com and has been working on her initiative for the last 3 years. She has led Project Jagriti, an effort to bridge the gender gap in digital spaces. In her project, she traveled to a network of remote villages in Rajasthan and took interactive digital literacy sessions of more than 200 women and gave smartphones to some of them. Anya's articles have been published on the UN Women and UNICEF websites. She is also presented at international conferences. Anya is committed to women's empowerment, and her efforts are directed to creatively utilizing digital media for the emancipation and empowerment of women. We are extremely grateful and thankful to you for being with us here today. So over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much. And I suppose when you reached out to me, it was honestly, I think it was my duty to respond, because I knew I was going to be swamped in work for the next 2 months. But as a person who has a nonprofit initiative herself, I knew that it means a lot when people respond. And definitely, I felt like it was my duty. And just as I feel overjoyed when people respond and take part in my initiative, I had to take part in yours. So today I'm going to be speaking on content creation in the digital spaces, with a specific emphasis on podcasting and video making and blogging. So yes, let's dive right into it. I'll just share my screen. Yes, I hope the screen is visible now.
Yes, it's visible.
Great, thanks. So let's just give so what are the points that we're going to be discussing today? So the first one is podcasting. So I'll be giving an introduction to the Her Success Bits podcast, which is basically my podcast and what your podcast should be about. What it takes to start your own podcast and hosting your podcast, different hosting platforms, and also some tips for starting your own podcast. So the next thing is going to be blogging. We're going to be talking about how to get started, guest blogging, advantages of guest blogging, and an opportunity for all of you. Also, video making, what goes into video making. I'm just going to be giving a short introduction over here. And then lastly, content marketing. So the Her Success Bits podcast is basically a podcast in which I talk about the experiences and situations that I encounter when I'm working on my website, my nonprofit initiative, which is Her Success Bits. Since I am very young, I'm 17 years old, and I started this initiative when I was 14 years old. I encounter a lot of hilarious situations when I am, working and networking, right? So it's basically a pretty fun podcast that you all can tune into. So what should your podcast be about? So these are just some points to be kept in mind while you're trying to decide what you're going to, make an entire podcast out of. So choose something that is broad enough to base a podcast on. You shouldn't, run out of things to talk about after, say, 5 episodes. That kind of defeats the purpose, right? So some examples would be movie reviews or tech or food reviews or travelogues. So in these type of broad categories, you can say make an episode out of each movie you watch, right? So that would definitely help you, come up with more content. Then it all comes down to content, obviously. Even the most popular influencers spend hours on creating good content. So make sure that you do not neglect that area. Finally, it should be something that you're passionate about. I don't want you all to get swept in by the idea of, picking something broad enough, because when you're speaking about something that you're passionate about, all the things come naturally. For example, me and my website, I just can go on and on about it, right? So that's that. So next, we're looking at what it takes. So just to provide everybody a brief, introduction of what it takes to get started. The first is equipment. Now, I remember when I was starting my podcast, this was a major concern for me because I kind of was, I was experienced with video editing. So I knew that audio editing wasn't really going to be that big of an issue for me. But I was a bit concerned about the equipment because I had a vague idea of what I should do. So one thing that I found out was that when you're starting, you absolutely do not need expensive equipment or, elaborate mics or anything to start out. I personally did not really, I bought a nice mic for myself, and that's that. I mean, that's really all you need. And the next thing that we're talking about is obviously basic audio editing skills. Your content needs to be edited pretty nicely because podcasts have the least audience retention, at least according to me. And they also have one of the most loyal listeners. So what would make sure that, your podcast is, attracting new audiences and, it's people really like listening to you? I think that the major thing that plays a big role in this is your editing skills. Your podcast needs to be sharp. It needs to be precise. It doesn't need to be redundant. People don't like listening to things over and over again. That's boring, right? So you really need to invest some time learning basic audio editing skills. And YouTube itself has a lot of videos of people explaining how you can, really get started with podcast editing. And the next is obviously commitment. It takes a lot of effort in making content and sheer labor in recording and editing each minute of your podcast. So even the analysis of how an episode is doing can be stressful. And after you've put in all the effort and, you've got an episode out, I think one of the most important aspects is going back to that episode, seeing all of your analysis and, sort of figuring out what went wrong if you didn't get as much of attention or as much of listeners as you had hoped to get. Was your content not good enough? Was the editing not good enough? Was it not, really relatable? Figure out what you can do to sort of get it out there and get it and make it better, obviously. The next thing is equipment and editing. I have just briefly talked about this in the previous slide, but I'm just going to elaborate a bit on this. So the first thing in equipment you need is a microphone. A good quality internal microphone would do, and obviously it depends on the number of hosts. If you are planning on having a co-host or if you're planning on having guest speakers, then you would need more than one internal microphone. A laptop for basic editing of your audio, and a mixer if you, again, intend to have guests or co-host. So you need to have a mixer to integrate and balance the audio and all of that stuff. Coming on to editing, you need an editing software. You can use anything. I use GarageBand. You can use Audacity or any other editing software. It basically depends on your personal preference and what you like working with. So yes, any software would be good. How it will take time. Be patient. I spent hours trying to figure out different things, how they work in both video editing and audio editing. So you would want to watch a couple of tutorials to get started, and you would want to, just sit in front of the screen and stare at the software and just figure out a couple of things by yourself. So then you'll be good to go, I promise. Hosting a podcast, and should I have a co-host? This is a question that I think everybody who's trying to, start up a podcast struggles with. Should I have a co-host, or should I just invite guest speakers? Should I do it alone? And if I do it alone, will I run out of things to talk about? So I'm just going to outline the pros and cons of having a co-host. There are not many cons, but still. So content. In the pro section, there's much more to share and discuss. So if there's another person sitting right beside me and, recording with me, I would have a lot of things to discuss about. And the podcast generally, turns into more of a conversation type one. So, and it's obviously very easy to brainstorm new topics to discuss and new things to, talk about. That's definitely a plus. And there's division of labor as well. So say I have a co-host with me and my strong suit is, say, audio editing. The other person can maybe, work on the script if my podcast is a scripted podcast, or can work on new ideas that we work upon in like the next episodes or so. So that makes it easier and certainly more enjoyable. The cons are definitely that you have to work out an arrangement and you have to follow schedules more punctually, because now it's not just you who's, working on the podcast. You have to take care and respect of other people's schedules as well. And obviously you have to contribute your part. So the next thing is hosting platforms. There are so many hosting platforms. I've just listed some of them right here. There's Podbean, Buzzsprout, Blueberry, Libsyn, Anchor, SoundCloud. So you can choose any one of them, and many of them are completely free. So you can just get started without, really paying much. So that's that. And then there are some tips for starting your podcast. So the two things that I would really like to emphasize upon would be description, and the description box of your podcast, and the cover of your podcast. And why I want to emphasize upon both of these things, I'll just let you know. So the first thing is the description. So your description is an essential part of your podcast. It's because it's what makes people decide whether or not they want to hear your podcast at all. So you need to, really work a lot on your description and keep it short and fun. And the audience should get to know the gist of your podcast and also be drawn to it. Because I feel like when I personally am picking out podcasts that I want to listen to, I really rely on the description to sort of understand what the podcast is going to be exploring, what the people are going to be talking about. So descriptions are really important. So keep that in mind. And the other thing is cover. Since podcasts don't have any visuals, your cover is going to be, I think, the only graphics that the people are going to be seeing, right? So you need to be spending time designing your cover and making it attractive. Sometimes I just get drawn to certain podcasts just because I like their cover. So, you need to really invest some time and design your cover. And there are a lot of graphics design softwares that you can be using. There are a lot of online softwares. For example, PicMonkey and Canva. These two are basically the softwares that I'm using, and they're really simple to use and they get the work done. So I recommend using these two for designing your cover or any social media shout outs. Then the other thing that we're going to be discussing about is blogging, and I'm going to be discussing about how to get started. So the first thing is making a website. If you're not tech savvy, there are a lot of website builders like WordPress and Squarespace and all of that. So that can really make the process a lot easier if you're really wanting to get started with it, right? The text blogs are meant to be informal and personal and short. So you need to, sort of keep it again in sort of a informal style and write things that you're passionate about, obviously. Then there are images. This one's pretty obvious. Please use original or non-copyrighted images. If you can't take original photos, then you can try these pretty cool websites. They're under the Creative Commons license. So I really like going on Pexels and Pixabay.com. They're amazing websites, and I would recommend them to anybody because they're really cool images, and all of them are under the Creative Commons license, I think. So the next thing is for people who are like scared to branch out on their own, who don't really want to, make their own website or start their own blog under their name. And they're really looking to just blog, but not on such a large level. So I would recommend guest blogging for those people. I myself have guest blogged for a couple of sites, and honestly, the experience is pretty cool. So the websites all around the world would invite writers to contribute blogs to their website. This can be on their online forums or any other section. So guest blogging is definitely something that people should consider if they're good at writing and if they want to explore new stuff. So I'm going to be highlighting the advantages of guest blogging and why one should choose guest blogging if they want to start out on their own. So if you want to experiment with writing on different topics, guest blogging might be a great platform because the thing is that when you start your own blog, you might limit yourself to a certain topic, and you might find that you're not being able to commit to it, and you're not finding your passion, and you're not really interested in it anymore. So I feel like guest blogging is definitely something which allows you to write on a wider variety of topics, and also sort of explore what you like writing about. So I might find my passion after guest blogging for a couple of sites. I might say that, hey, this is really something that I like writing about. Let me now start out my own blog and website and start writing about this topic. So guest blogging for websites with large community gives you more exposure and can also help you in making your own website popular. So say I have a website and I start guest blogging on some other person's website. So if people like my content, they would like to explore, my website and my stuff that I'm doing on the site, right? So readers want to get more content from their favorite writer. So that's pretty simple. So that's, again, a really good networking strategy. It can also help make your content more readable and prepare you better for writing your own blog. So if you're, experimenting with platforms which have large communities, obviously you're going to get more views, you're going to get more likes, and more feedback on how your writing is. So if I'm writing on a big platform, I'd be able to assess my content better and make it, work on it more so that it's more relatable to a larger audience. You'd be surprised to find out how many websites invite people to write for them. So I would recommend emailing your favorite forums to find out if they have a section for guest blogging. Also, if you want to get featured, this is for you. As you know, I have a website, hersuccessbits.com. It brings the stories of women from diverse backgrounds into the limelight. And the effort is to inspire women and build a positive and uplifting ecosystem. So you can follow the social media handles of Her Success Bits and get your story published right now. So the link to submit would be in the chat box, and you can also contact hersuccessbits@gmail.com to get your story featured. So this is one of the stories, the recent stories that I have published on the website. And then there is video editing. This is a page of my YouTube channel. It's the Her Success Bits YouTube channel. I've published various stories of women and interviews of women. I've edited them and sort of made them public for everybody to watch and be inspired by. So that's that. I'm going to be giving a brief introduction to what goes into making a video, or you can say starting your YouTube channel. I'm going to be talking about the video itself. It should be shot with a good quality camera, and it can be shot with a phone if the quality is good enough. I mean, I shoot videos on my phone all the time. Then there's audio. Invest in good color mics, and they really improve the quality of your video. And I remember when I started out Her Success Bits, I personally did not use any kind of color mic for the first couple of videos. And it was really, I don't know why I did that, but my quality, the quality of my videos really suffered. And so that's something that I learned from. And then I obviously invested in some color mics, and they're much better now, the audio quality. So look for non-copyrighted video or non-copyrighted music for your video, for the background sound and effects. So you need to look at non-copyrighted music. So many times you would like to insert background music and stuff to your videos to make it better, and also some sound effects. So you can browse in, browse in the non-copyrighted music libraries to look for these type of sound effects. The third thing is video editing. Video editing, according to me, is as important as the video itself because nicely edited videos certainly get more positive reviews. I've been working with iMovie for the past 2 years right now, and it's been pretty good. And I'm thinking of switching to another software, but I think that iMovie is definitely something that you might want to consider when you're starting out with video editing. The fourth thing is thumbnail and shout outs. So specifically if you're targeting YouTube, the thumbnail is very important, obviously, because it's the first thing that people are going to see of your video, and that's what's going to make them click on your video to actually view it. There are some really good graphics design software that I was just talking about. They're meant specifically for like content creators which really get the work done, as I was saying. I use PicMonkey and Canva, so I really recommend both of these graphics softwares. You can really, explore these and get your work done really quickly. So as I was talking about, I use iMovie. The editing softwares can be a bit hard to master, but the outcome is worth the effort. So I've been using that for the past 3 years. It's basically a sort of a snippet for the software that I'm using. And then there is content marketing. There's social media, obviously, in content marketing. So social media can be a great tool for content marketing, as all of you know. Giving shout outs to guest speakers and writers, which are shared in their network, is a great way to expand your community. So you give shout outs each time you say you publish a story on your blog like I do, and you give a shout out to the person who has written the story. That's really impactful because then the person, shares it in their community, and it sort of makes your community grow as well and gives more exposure to your network. Then there is, in case of podcasting, being guest speakers on others' podcasts and inviting guest speakers on your own podcast. Both of them will give your podcast exposure to a potentially new audience. For example, if I go on to someone else's podcast, I would be speaking, and I would be speaking to an audience which is not my own, which would definitely increase, spread awareness about my podcast in the other audience. So that way. The same goes for blogging, of course. Guest blogging, as I was just talking about, and inviting guest bloggers on your own website, if you have one, would help get your website more views. So you can, sort of chart out a small section for guest blogging in your own website and invite people who want to write on your website from all over the world. This would really help because those people who are writing for your website would also share their articles that they've written for you. And so you would get more exposure again for your website. But as I said, it all depends on your content. No marketing strategy will ever work if your content isn't unique and exciting. So you can do all of this in social media awareness and digital marketing, but it really boils down to your content and what you're working on. Your content should add value to the reader's life. So that's basically my motto. So yes, thank you so much. I really enjoyed sharing this presentation with all of you. My social media handles for my initiative are given on the screen, and you can contact hersuccessbits@gmail.com if you want to get your story published or for any other queries. So yes, hersuccessbits.com, write, inspire, empower.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This presentation was really insightful. I'm sure our viewers took a lot of things back from this presentation of yours. So I think we should dive right into the question and answer session.
Yeah, sure.
So for the people who are viewing this on YouTube, feel free to type in your queries in the chat box. So in the meantime, I have some questions I would like to ask Anya. So I think I'll start. So what is the objective of Her Success Bits podcast?
So I think the objective of many podcasts is to basically share experiences and with other people. And my objective of my podcast is definitely along the same lines. It's basically me sharing sort of behind the scenes experiences of what it is like for a 17-year-old to be working on a nonprofit initiative, and different experiences, different situations I often find myself in different networking strategies that I might use. And yeah, that's the objective of my podcast.
Wow, that's really inspiring. So, what inspires you to share the stories of women all over the world?
I think what inspires me to share the stories of women all over the world would be that I feel like women's stories of success aren't celebrated enough. I feel like when we picture a woman who's working, we picture a lot of hardship, we picture a woman struggling, and we don't really think about how happy she is, working on the things that she's passionate about. So I feel like my website and the stories that women share over there not only highlight the struggles and obstacles that they, faced while making, their journey successful, but also how they enjoy working and how they are, happy in, working what they find, holds a lot of meaning and importance to them.
Definitely. And it is such a great thing to see other people who want to do good for other underrepresented and underprivileged communities. What you're doing is something extremely commendable. So
thank you so much.
So what is one thing that Project Jagriti did for the people? It helped that you didn't really expect.
Okay, so for those of you who do not know what Project Jagriti is, it's basically a project that I undertook in which I went to different remote villages of Rajasthan, and I gave digital literacy sessions to women from the marginalized community, and I also gave smartphones to a fundraiser. So I think that something that was really unexpected that happened in Project Jagriti was that apart from the digital literacy sessions, these women that I was interacting with, they really trusted me enough to sort of come out of their comfort zone and share their life stories. I mean, it was definitely I went there to spread digital awareness and digital literacy, but I never thought that I was going to be learning such important life lessons myself. And just hearing the stories of these women who, were really, it was incredibly inspiring how they sort of struggled and how they faced their obstacles in the day-to-day life and, made it possible to be where they are today.
For sure, we can learn from people all around. We can learn from things where we can learn from places where we never even expected to be in the first place.
Definitely.
So if you could have a billboard for your podcast with anything on it, what would it be and why?
Okay, this is a really good question. So if I could have a billboard with my of my podcast, I would perhaps I don't know. I think I would, use the tagline of "It's never too young to enact a change," because I started out pretty young, and I feel like that doesn't really matter. What matters is you're really acting towards what you think would make a change and would better the society. So I think that would definitely be something that I would like to put up.
Definitely. I think we